All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first thing I want to do is create an artboard. I like working in standard 1080p, but you can work in whatever size artboard you prefer. But for this project, let's try and just keep it to 1080p. That way we're roughly working in the same size space. So we're going to create one, and we're just going to call this working. And then we're going to create another one. Oop, wrong one. And we're just going to call this storage. All right. So what we want to try and accomplish here is we want to build in the working section and we want to store in the storage section. Now I am using Chrome and it will allow me to copy and paste between two different artboards in Canva. If for whatever reason your setup will not allow you to do that, all you need to do is just confine everything to one artboard. But to give you an example, I'm here in Canva, I'm in the working board, I'm going to go to shapes, there's a gray shape, I'm going to make something silly real fast. So here's my silly shape. Right, copy. And by the way, for those of you who aren't familiar, the hotkeys on that are Control C for copy and Control V for paste. And then paste, and here's the silly little thing that I made. And if we group it, we can manipulate it to whatever size we want, shove it up here in a corner, and it can just hang out until we want it. Then we can make it nice and big, or whatever we want to do, and bring it over to another artboard. Let's go ahead and delete that, because we don't really want that. Same thing over here. All right, we're going to start off with the basics, just kind of building all the things that are going to go in our illustration. And we're going to just try and keep it as simple as we can on the get-go, and then we'll slowly progress into the more difficult things. So the simplest thing to build is our clock. Here we have a circle. We're going to make him black. And it doesn't really matter what size we pick, just pick whatever's comfortable for you in your work area. We're going to copy that. And we're going to kind of sort of center on it, make it just a scant bit smaller. Center it again, trying to use our lines. And then we're going to change that to gray. And then we're going to copy again. Center again. Make it a scant bit smaller. Center again. We're going to change that to white. So now we have the ring of our clock. I am making just a standard, very minimalistic clock. If you want to gussy it up or make it look like a wooden clock or do something where, say, the white is off to the side and you're doing something very artistic, or if you want this to be bigger and kind of centered and give it like a kind of a sandy, woodsy color, you can do that as well. But for today, we're just going to try and keep it to this nice, very simple, minimalistic clock. Next thing we're going to make is the hands of our clock, and for that we're going to need this donut shape right here. And yet again, just get it to a workable size. We're going to pull that over here, and we're going to go ahead and change that to black. And then we're going to find our triangle. And we are going to make our triangle as skinny as we can. Bring that down to a little bit more workable size. And what we are trying to do is we are trying to find the absolute center of this circle. And that's how we're going to line everything up. And again, make it skinny. Not too terribly skinny, but relatively skinny. So once we got the center, then we're going to come up anywhere in the donut shape itself, and we are going to place one of our hands. Then we're going to copy this, bring it over to the side, give it some rotation. Yet again, we're going to line up, we're going to come out, and that's it. Now what I would recommend that you highly consider doing to make this clock look as realistic as possible, the two hands on any standard clock are not the same size. So pick one and shorten it just a little, or make one longer, depending on however you built your clock. And that's going to kind of give it a little bit more of a realistic feel. The last thing we need is a second hand. So again, we're going to copy. We're going to flip this guy all the way around. We're going to drop him in, and we're going to shorten this guy up a lot, because usually what you see on the second hand on a clock, they're usually very small. Making sure we're nice and lined up. And make them a little bit longer. And there we go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn this guy black, and this guy is going to be red. And we are going to push him all the way to the back. Then we're going to highlight this, and we're going to group it. Then we're going to highlight this, and we're going to group it as well. And then we need to shrink this guy down to fit our clock. Now, if you just stick this right in the center of your clock and say, nah, that looks fine, it doesn't look very realistic. So you're going to need to find a comfortable angle. And that's where things are going to get very difficult for you in terms of centering this. So you're really going to have to use your eye very keenly to find where that center point is on this circle. Now remember, your leading lines are only going to help you out so much, because as you can see right now, it's saying that I'm centered, but am I truly centered? No, because my image is off. And what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of eyeball it, because the size of this clock, it's not going to matter a whole lot, but some easy things to do are take some guides, center the guide, pull the guide back to the center, and just kind of see if you're roughly in the right spot. And you know, we're not perfect, but we're pretty darn close. We may be just a scant bit off to the left. I went a little too far. So we're going to call that about right. And you can do the same thing with your top to bottom. And we got very little peeking through. And we are way low. That should be about right. I think we're just a little bit too high. Okay, and that's going to be our clock. Now that's roughly going to be pointing at, say, somewhere in the 11-ish range, depending on which hand is shorter or longer on your clock. It really doesn't matter. What matters is, does the clock look real? Now you might have a temptation to come over here and try and do something where like you have the second hand over here, and you have like the minute hand or the hour hand over here. And what I will caution you on doing that is you start to have to really pay attention to your percentages on your angles, because if you're off just a little, it ends up looking like this, and that just looks extremely sloppy. And for the size this clock is going to be on our illustration, it's better to have something that looks clean and tight, and that may not be a completely accurate depiction in terms of what the time could be, but is a very clean and crisp depiction of what a clock would be. So we're going to get rid of this. We're going to ungroup and group to make sure we have all this grouped together. So now it is one independent object. I can make it very small. I can make it very big. You could take this even further. If you wanted to shrink this guy down and take a couple of these characters or objects and kind of hit the sides. And yet again, I'm doing this very roughly, so you know, you would need to clean up more, but you can start to see how you'd have something reminiscent of an old school alarm clock. And obviously that's not perfect, but you could take it even further and get it even more perfect. Just trying to give you some ideas. So now we're going to take this guy, we're going to click copy, we're going to go over to our storage section, and we're going to click paste. I'm going to make him nice and teeny tiny and shove him in a corner. And he's going to hang out there. So he is stored as a complete object in our Canva profile from now on. And if we want to take him and copy him and pull him over to another artboard or illustration or project or whatever you like to call it, you can do that. And this is really a great kind of time-saving way to get a bunch of objects together, get a bunch of pseudo real life flat design things together. That way, if you're doing this, say, for friends, family, you're doing it on Fiverr, or maybe you're doing this for your job or whatever else, you're not having to reinvent the wheel every single time. You can go in here, you can pull from your compiled objects and build something relatively quickly. Or maybe if you can't build it all, you can build, say, 30% or 50% or what have you, and just save yourself a lot of time. So now we are going to move on to our next item.